to explore using data for better content marketing. Thank you all very much for joining us. I'm Adam Lewis, Head of Social and Content at Bright Blue Day, and I'll be kicking the webinar off today. And we expect to last about 50 minutes. On housekeeping, if you've got any questions, please submit them through the screen on the right-hand side, and we'll try and cover off the questions as we go along. And if there's time at the end, we'll also have an opportunity for further questions. So here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to start by really drilling down into how social data can help plan content marketing. So really setting the context about the importance of data to get your content sharper and more effective. We're then going to look at Facebook topic data, explain what it is and the amazing data that it can yield at a huge scale that can be used to understand customer behaviors around content and creative. And then we're going to do a case study to show a real-life application of Facebook topic data. And in this case, we're going to look at a very well-known luxury fashion brand. So that's the agenda. So the speakers are obviously myself, Adam Lewis, my agency, Bright Blue Day. We help clients with content planning, content production, and distribution. And I've, over nearly 20 years now, have experience in comms and marketing, having worked in social media agencies, PR agencies with big brands such as IBM, Sony, Thomson Reuters. And I think, personally, social data is a very big deal, and it's very powerful in shaping how we go about doing marketing. I'm pleased to be joined by Jay Crowell. He is Director of Product Management with DataSift and the Product Owner for Facebook Topic Data. So Jay has managed social data analytics products for nearly a decade. He was formerly a Wall Street Journal reporter, and he's interested in data storytelling and exploring new ways that social data can be used to understand how people interact with products and events. And then we have Sarah, who is Director of Insights at Commetric. Sarah has nearly 20 years of business intelligence and data analytics experience, having worked for some very big players such as Accenture, Hill & Knowlton, Dow Jones. And in her current role, she's helping clients really develop their comms and marketing strategies through this data. And like all of us, she's very excited about what Facebook topic data can do and what the opportunities that opens up. So let me just kick off really then by starting the conversation around content. So as most of you know, marketeers face some pretty big challenges really these days in getting their product or message across. We're living in a world where we are bombarded with information. Our attention spans are estimated to be now 8 seconds. It's a world where 75% of marketing emails aren't opened, where 55% of visitors to websites spend less than 15 seconds there, and so I could go on. So what that means is the opportunity to grab your customer's attention is small and getting smaller. And how do we respond to this? Well, I think this is where content marketing has really evolved and why it's growing so fast. In the UK, marketeers are expected to, 60% of marketeers are expected to increase their spend on content marketing. And content marketing is trying to do the same job as traditional advertising. It's just doing it in a different way. And I think that's best summed up by this move from talking to people to talking with people. It's not about, it's resisting the temptation to talk about yourself and your product. Instead, talking about content and subject matter and topics that matter to people and that have a relevance to their everyday lives. So, great. So that's content marketing. But how do we find out about this stuff that customers care about that we can engage them with? Well, I think what we need to do is find what I call the content sweet spot. It's that bit in the middle of the brand and what they care about. It's the content sweet spot, the areas of subjects and content that inspire, that help inform, that entertain. I always use a personal analogy for myself. I love cycling. I only buy a bike once every few years. But my bike retailer is always talking to me with great content. They provide me with information about the Tour de France, what local bike races there are near me, product reviews from other customers that are things that are relevant to me, and even things like guides to commuting in the winter. These are all really helpful things that I consume and I'm grateful for, and it means that that retailer has a greater mind share than other retailers as far as I'm concerned. And what that's doing is building affinity with that brand and myself. I'm becoming a follower and I trust them, and that's what this is all about. So getting to the sweet spot, we talk about 5 steps. There's 5 areas that we really need to understand. We need to understand the audience, and when I say audience, this is actually the people who are actually engaging with your content, rather than the people that we aiming the content at or think that we're aiming the content at. We ran an e-commerce campaign recently aimed at men and women, but we found there was much higher levels of engagement with the male-focused content, and that really encouraged us to invest more in that male audience. We saw the clients saw a bigger opportunity for growth. We need to understand the topics. What are the topics that the target audiences are interested in? So forget your product, your market, your industry. Does this audience have a higher affinity for topics around food, for example, or sport? And how can we use this to develop content that speaks to their passions? There's a huge variety of content formats that we are able to deploy these days, and when working with clients, that's a huge part of their budget is absorbed in producing the end product that's going to be talked about and shared. So we really need to use data to help us understand how that investment should be split between different content formats, whether that's video, photography, moving graphics, and so on. And of course, then there's the channels. On average, we are using 3.9 social media networks on an active basis in this country. So we need to understand where those conversations are happening, which social networks are we most likely to get the engagement that we're looking for. And then obviously we have individuals, influencers, who have the ability to drive conversation. We need to understand who they are. And a practical example of how some of that insight is used to direct creative and content was a campaign that we were running recently. Things have changed a lot since the Don Draper era. We're no longer making decisions based on gut instinct, which Don was obviously extremely good at doing. But we've got this data now to inform the planning and the optimization. So we recently ran a Facebook advertising campaign. Creative A was the one that everybody loved. We thought this was clearly better than the other one, and we were very excited to see it deployed. But actually, the data told us that Creative B was better, more effective, it created more engagement. And there was metrics that we used to prove that. So the relevancy score on Facebook was higher for Creative B, the click-through rates were higher, and crucially, as far as the client's investment was concerned, the cost per click was lower. So we're able to use this data to inform the creative. So data sources for content planning. There's lots of them out there. We find that on-site content metrics are very important. So understanding and drilling down through things like Google Analytics to understand the content that's getting the most, the highest dwell time, the lowest bounce rate, the biggest shares, whether that's specific web pages or blog topics. We can use data from search, understanding volumes and keywords to inform where the trends are. We can obviously use social signals around what content is getting talked about, what's trending, what's creating the impressions on social. And obviously where you're running paid campaigns of the sort that I just mentioned, how does that, how do the key metrics inform what content works and what doesn't? And when we come to social data, there's so many opportunities here, and I just briefly put this chart up to explain, give some insight into the various places we can go. And obviously the individual social platforms themselves have analytics capability. Twitter has the ability to look at different audiences and benchmark yourself against other audiences based on interest and demographics. We know that Facebook has a lot of insight, Google, I would say that LinkedIn is probably the most limited at the moment in terms of what it can provide. In contrast, what we're about to talk about in a minute, Facebook topic data, really does kind of score very highly across those 5 areas of the sweet spot in terms of content planning. So with that in mind, it's a perfect opportunity to hand over to Jay. Tell us a little bit more about what Facebook topic data can do. Jay.
Great, thanks so much, Adam. I was just keeping an eye on the question window for you. I don't see any questions yet, but folks, please don't be shy. Pop your questions in there and we'll get to them at the end. Okay. Great, so let's talk a little bit about DataSift as we get started here. Oh, sorry, skip back to that slide. Great. Okay, so who is DataSift? We're all about human data intelligence. So human-created data continues to accelerate as seen through the enormous growth in social networks like Facebook, YouTube, Tumblr, and others. But gaining insights into this data is challenging due to the unstructured nature of the data and also the massive scale and speed at which the data is created, and the fact that in many cases privacy regulation and terms of service can dictate how and when this data can be used and applied by businesses. Okay, so DataSift partners closely with Facebook, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about topic data and why we're so excited about it. We have brought this to market in partnership with Facebook, and what it is aggregated and anonymized content data about activities, events, brand names, and other subjects that people are sharing on Facebook. So this includes everything from a Facebook post to something that someone has reshared, if that's a link. And you can analyze all of that data and understand which topics resonate with demographic segments in different locations. That's what topic data is all about. Okay, so by any measure, Facebook is the #1 social platform for marketers, and it continues to outgrow the competition off of an already massive base. And the numbers here speak for themselves, both in terms of the audience on Facebook and the breadth of sharing and the time being spent on Facebook as well. And according to a recent eMarketer report, Facebook is now making up 65% of total social ad spend and outgrowing the competition. So if you're not taking Facebook into account, you're missing the majority of how and what people are engaging on with social. So nothing else on the planet is growing as fast as this in the social space. Okay, so obviously there are some pre-existing avenues to get access to Facebook data that predate the introduction of topic data last spring. For example, the Facebook Page Insights and Ads APIs, which Adam talked about a little bit, have been available, and those are freely available to anyone to use. And those are built for specific purposes, but they don't give you the full picture of what people are talking about on Facebook. So you have access to some information today, but it's a fraction of what's being discussed. So topic data is all about giving you a fuller picture, and it's an entirely new data set that's never been available before. So what we're looking to do is provide insights in a privacy-safe way from what people are sharing and talking about in a wide variety of industries, from automotive to entertainment, food, consumer products, you name it. And in making this available for researching and understand what drives consumer behavior, you can leverage that across a range of use cases to help move your business forward. Okay. So we often get asked about data volumes, and I think it's important to point out that data volume is only part of the equation when you're trying to get to an insight. You need a robust set of data to analyze, but ultimately it's about the insights and not the volume. But we have done a little bit of comparative analysis over a 7-day period in the automotive space, and what we found was there was about 70 times as much data inside of topic data across the news feed, which includes what people are sharing with their friends, as opposed to just what's happening on pages alone. So looking at pages, specifically brand pages, will give you a glimpse into what people are talking about, but it doesn't give you the full extent of the demographic and geographic makeup of the audience, as well as all of the links and hashtags that people are sharing in a particular topic space. Okay. And we've also compared this to other data sets outside of Facebook across other social data sources, for example, Twitter, Tumblr, blogs, and forums, and found that there's about 6 times as much data volume inside of Facebook topic data. So the implications of that, I mean, imagine what you can find on more nuanced topics like individual smaller brands in a consumer product context, or understanding how topics resonate in specific geographies and demographic segments. The possibilities are endless. And I think it's also worth talking about the nature and shape of this data set. So it's not just bigger, but it's also, I think, fundamentally different from other types of social data. It has significant representation across all different types of demographic groups, old and young, across over 130 countries, as well as looking at things like gender. And it's an authentic representation of audience opinion. So what that means is, I think the way that we talk about brands and products, we're very open with our friends, family, and colleagues in non-public spaces, and you can get interesting insights out of what people are saying about brands and experiences. So for example, people might feel more comfortable talking about their aspirations toward a luxury brand in a non-public space, for example. And all of the demographic data in topic data is self-declared. So that means it's the information that, as people on Facebook, we put on our profiles, including our age, our gender, and our home base location. So let's have a look at the anatomy of topic data. Topic data is very multidimensional, so I'll sort of work clockwise around this slide, starting with demographics. I mentioned that gender, age, and region, which means something slightly different in each country. In the US, it means states, or the sub-countries of the UK, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. That's the demographic data set that you have to analyze, as well as sentiment, whether people are speaking positively or negatively in a particular post. Engagement is a very important part of topic data. So all of the likes, comments, and reshares that occur on Facebook, those serve as amplification inside of the data set that you can use to understand which posts resonate. We find that's very powerful. It's important to include engagement in your analysis so that you understand what resonates. Also, topic analysis. So upstream of DataSif's platform, Facebook applies its own natural language processing algorithms to infer topics from the text of posts, and those are attached to the posts such that you can analyze them. And that gives you a nice structured taxonomy for understanding what people are talking about. And that topic taxonomy is built from the universe of Facebook pages, so it has a fresh web element to it as well. As people start talking about new events that occur in the news, for example, people create pages around those, and they work their way into the topic library organically. Links is particularly useful for understanding how to make your content marketing more effective, and I think Sarah is going to talk a little bit more about this, but you can see which types of links different demographic segments are sharing, and I think that can be very instructive to understand how you can tune your own content marketing to connect with those audience segments. And then finally, text analysis. So the text that people write in their Facebook posts is available for you to filter and categorize on. So you understand the phraseology that is used in a particular industry or topic space, and you're able to classify those buckets of keywords and phrases into broader themes to understand the data in a way that's relevant to you. Let's talk about privacy for a moment. So of course, for this approach to social data analysis to have the brave, bold future that I certainly hope that it will have, we need to ensure that user privacy is respected both from a compliance standpoint and also in terms of the broader expectation of privacy that we all have as people on Facebook. So user identity, including usernames, are removed from the data set upstream of DataSif's platform. And all of the data is analyzed anonymously and in aggregate. Okay, so the data is collected in real time into a data set that you can issue queries against to understand how a particular audience segment is talking about a specific topic. And the data is restricted to people who are over the age of 18 globally. And there are also audience size thresholds in place to ensure that small numbers of users can't be identified, and this is all in the interest of making sure that our privacy as people on Facebook is respected. Oh, sorry. Okay, so a common question that I get about topic data is, how can I understand the results if I can't see the text? When you're doing a time series analysis, for example, you may see a spike in the data, meaning that more people are talking about the topic that you're interested in. And how can you understand why that is if you can't read these non-public posts verbatim in the raw, so to speak? And I think the text classification that I described earlier helps with that a great deal. And topic data also includes a data set called super public, meaning the public posts that people share on Facebook when they set their privacy settings to allow anyone to read their posts. So you can get a sampling of the text, the raw verbatim text, so that you can understand the words and phrases that are being used. And I think that's primarily useful for improving your filtering terms over time so that they match the way people really talk about a topic space. I think that is a better approach than just reading the verbatim text and coming away with thinking you have a sense of what people think about a brand or product purely from the public text, but we don't really have time to read all of that public text as busy people anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk through a case study. Sarah, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Jay. That was a great introduction to topic data and its capabilities. Hello everyone, it's now my turn to take you through how Commetric uses topic data to help content marketers like Adam. We wanted to take a look at the luxury brand sector, and we decided to focus in on Louis Vuitton in particular. And there are a few reasons for this, particularly the fact that they seem to be working through some interesting challenges at the moment in the way they reach out to their market. So we've brought together a SWOT analysis here, which is a summary of different market analysts' views on their business. And we can see, well, you probably know yourselves, that Louis Vuitton have a very strong brand heritage. They've operated successfully in multiple markets for many years. And they have a great diversified product portfolio from accessories through to clothing and so on. There are huge opportunities for the brand, big growth and demand from the BRICS and Latin American markets. And they also have an opportunity to appeal to younger buyers. So their core market, their traditional market, is perhaps the older purchaser, but there is obviously a huge growth in younger buyers for them. One of their weaknesses is brand recall for clothing. So although they're well known for their accessories, they are very keen to improve their recall of their clothing lines, and that's been shown by some of their key recruitments over the years. So they recruited Marc Jacobs as their creative director back in the late 90s with this intention, and more recently they've recruited a creative director from Balenciaga, who is also looking to relaunch their clothing brand. Threats to the brand, as with all luxury brand companies, counterfeiting is a huge issue. So, in summary, how do these, we want to take these core issues, there we go, which are to engage the younger consumer, to build awareness of clothing lines and manage the counterfeit threat, and have a look at how these might impact their content strategy objectives. So how do we do that using Facebook topic data? How can we use it to help shape this content strategy? Commetric puts a dashboard over Facebook topic data to make it very easy to interrogate and analyze. So our data scientists work away busily behind the scenes, working with our clients to really develop their objectives and understand their issues so that we can craft a platform that gives them the data they need very quickly and very simply, and therefore makes the insight very effective and ready to use. We do that by taking keywords which relate to the themes and the topics that are of concern to a client, and isolating the Facebook content that applies. The great thing about Facebook topic data, though, is that we can also account for the unknowns. So you don't know what you don't know, and that's something that we never want to overlook. And Facebook topic data has a process whereby it surfaces the topics that are currently being associated with your brand. So we can code for certain issues, sort of such as the brand's messaging objectives, for example, or looking for certain events that are key to the brand at a certain time, and we can measure and analyze the content that people are engaging with around those. But then Facebook topic data will also surface other topics that are coming to the fore that maybe we haven't thought about and haven't expected, which is what makes it really interesting stuff. So when we dive into the content, Facebook content for Louis Vuitton, let's have a look at what sort of the type of content that's currently being posted. What this is telling us, the chart on the left, is telling us that there are different types of interaction. So the Facebook community, if you want to call it that, interact in different ways, which you're probably familiar with. There are likes, and as you'd expect, there are many of those. It's very easy to like something on Facebook. There are also stories, so that's your status update effectively. Then you'll have a comment on an original story, and then a reshare of an original story. We can dive down into that a bit more deeply and interrogate how those stories look, what drives that pot of stories, and that takes us to the chart on the right. So looking at Louis Vuitton and the stories that mention that brand, we can see that the majority are actually posts. So original status updates, text posts, followed by photos, then links, that's your hyperlink, reshares, a photo album, and finally video. Now that's quite surprising because the text posts for a very visual brand such as LV is a surprise. We would expect photos to be higher and indeed videos to be much higher. If we'd looked at, for example, the sports arena and we took one of, say, the Premier League, video content by far dominates the type of content being shared around football, because everyone's talking about different goals and so on. And you'd expect to see that here, but we don't, so that's unusual. However, if we go into it in a bit more detail and how people are engaging with this content, so this is what's being posted, and we can also have a look to see at what people are engaging with, we can see that video shoots to the top of the ranking. So what this means is you have these two tables here. The one on the left, this is telling us that one video will be engaged with 286 times on average, whereas a text post is only 10 times. So those interactions could be likes, they could be reshares, they could be comments. But whatever interaction it is, it's engagement. And as we all know, that's what brands really want. That's where you get to the relationship, the conversation with a brand that Adam talked about. It's not just a funnel of noise coming from this brand that people can just turn off to. Similarly, when we look at what's being reshared, so the endorsement, if you like, that every brand wants, again, video blows everything out of the water, really. So of all the videos that were posted, they were getting over 25,000 reshares, as opposed to posts which were only just over 12,000 there. Sorry about the, I think there's a bit of a pause here. Okay, so now we dive into what brand content is driving this engagement, and that will help us to explore who exactly is engaging. So these are events that are happening at the moment that are critical or, you know, core to Louis Vuitton, but also general events that they are involved in. And we can see that Foundation Louis Vuitton is the initiative that's being most mentioned in posts at the moment, followed by Paris Fashion Weeks. We know that Paris, Milan and New York Fashion Weeks have all happened recently. So this tells us that the foundation and its different collections that it offers, that they offer art exhibitions, architecture, recitals and so on, is what's getting the most engagement. And when we can dive down into that further and find out what age groups are engaging in that, and you can see it's quite clear that it's the 45 plus bracket. So in terms of what's getting the most engagement at the moment, it's very much the Louis Vuitton Foundation, and it's appealing to their core older audience. However, if we start to explore what's driving youth engagement, we can see that there is a definite upturn at the moment in youth engagement, and there is a very particular subject or person that is driving that. So this is where we're looking at the unknowns. So when we originally coded this to look at luxury brands in the sector, including Louis Vuitton, we weren't aware of the Selena Gomez collaboration, and we didn't actually code for that, but Facebook topic data tells us that this is what's being surfaced at the moment in association with the brand, and that's because she's recently been signed up as an ambassador and has been appearing at many of the fashion weeks and is part of a campaign. You can see her there in the picture on the right. She's dressed head to toe in Louis Vuitton clothing and accessories, and it's achieving its objective, which presumably is to appeal to the younger audience. So we have a really great profile there where 18 to 24-year-olds, followed by 25 to 34-year-olds, are starting to trend in association with Louis Vuitton, in association with Selena Gomez. So great. So we saw that Selena Gomez was wearing the hat, she was wearing the bag, she was wearing the clothes. Is that helping to push mindshare towards the clothing section of the brand? Well, possibly more to be done here for LV. Accessories by far dominate, followed by colours, interestingly enough. So whereas we probably always think of the brown with the pale brown monogram on a lot of the leather goods particularly, any introduction of colours is something really appealing to the Facebook audience. They seem to engage around that quite a lot. And if we look at that in more detail, so this is where we really start to drill down, you can see exactly which items people are talking about, and it's actually watches. So you may think it's the bags, everyone has pictures with swinging their Louis Vuitton handbags, but watches, or timepieces as they call them, are actually what people are interested in. And on the colours point, you can see here we have some of the colours that are getting engagement, so navy, white and so on. The clothes are starting to feature. You can see dress, gown there, shirt, jeans, sunglasses, but it's definitely, there's still a lot of work to be done on associations with the portfolio. Now on this point, and we wanted to just mention whether there might be any brand risks and how Louis Vuitton might want to consider this in anything in their marketing. You may have noticed that Selena Gomez's hat there was fur, and materials are always a key concern in the fashion industry for obvious reasons. So we decided to have a look at that aspect for the brand as well. And it may be something that they want to head off at the pass if it seems like it might be an emerging issue, or something they may want to actually consider in production. Maybe, you know, they would change their materials and so on. So leather at the moment is being discussed a great deal, and that probably reflects that there's a lot of leather in the current collections which are being shown, and fur is also featuring. Now, I just want to draw your attention to the chart on the right. This is the same, or it's a development of the chart I showed you earlier about events being associated with the brand. And you can see that Peter is the fourth one. So it actually is outranking Milan Fashion Week at the moment. So Peter, I'm sure you're aware of them, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and they often use the fashion industry to get their point across, and they keep close. They survey the fashion industry quite closely and critique it quite frequently. So it's definitely something that Louis Vuitton should be aware of. The other brand risk was that we mentioned earlier, which of course was counterfeiting, which is a concern across the industry. So we've developed this rather nifty league of fakes, so called. So we've tried to develop some of the terms that are being associated with different brands and have a look at the brand buzz around some of these luxury brands. And we looked at, on the whole, we looked at Chanel, Prada, Gucci, Burberry, and Louis Vuitton in this particular study. And you can see that they're not ranking the highest. So the chart on the left is telling us where the position of the word fake is. So how many people are talking about fakes in association with the brand. And for Louis Vuitton, it's the fourth appearing word. So it's not the highest. That place was taken by another brand, but it's still very much a concern. There's lots of discussion about fake. And we can take that further. We can actually drill down into the regional use of that. So where there's lots of discussion of the term fake. We can also have a look to see if there's any URLs being shared around fake in association with the brand, what's the highest trending URL, and so on. So you can start to really explore those sorts of issues. Okay, now we wanted to have a look at where the audience is actually hanging out. So where are they getting their content from? This is obviously key for any content marketing strategy. How are people receiving the content? Where are they sharing it? What are they using it for? What are the common sites that they reference, and so on? And these are groups that we defined ourselves. So we had a look at the common sites of a lot of the content, so your L's and places like that, and then right the way through to the fashion bloggers. And what's interesting here about Louis Vuitton is the lack of content that is being engaged with around fashion blogs. So fashion blogs are really quite key now in the fashion sector. They really help to encourage designs to travel. There's a lot of movement from the ground up, if you like to call it that. So taking street design and interpreting it into mainstream collections, and lots of interpretations back the other way. And it really helps to build a brand, a position a brand. And so it's interesting that given their focus on appealing to a younger audience, the lack of content that's being engaged with from fashion blogs, and it's definitely something they'd want to develop. We can have a look at that and frame that in a slightly more developed way by looking at some of the sites that are getting engagement for Louis Vuitton. So this is a framework for some of the motivation for people that are reading and consuming content about fashion brands. So there's initiation, people that want to see behind the scenes of the luxury world. And Facebook topic data shows us that the common brands here in this group were nowfashion.com, sorry, the common sources, nowfashion.com, instyle.com, for example, both appealing to the female audience and a younger audience. On the right, we have the brands or the sources that are used for inspiration. So your fashion press, such as LUK, MTV, and outside.com, which is appealing to more of a male audience. When it comes to information about the business of fashion, well, the business of fashion, surprisingly, was one of the sources that was seen to be featuring quite heavily, and Data Digital. And then imitation. So this was the area where they're not performing so well. Michelle Romo, she's a fashion blogger, a stylish fashion blogger, and Hypebeast, which is more aimed at the male market, where it's providing recommendations, so a sort of reviews, if you will, about fashion. So that's where they're not featuring so strongly, and could be something that they want to think about when they're developing their strategy, how to really boost content that's going to appeal to those types of sources, the fashion blogs, essentially. Okay, so we're just coming on to a summary. So going back to Adam's lovely outline of the annual pulling together your content strategy and applying it to Louis Vuitton using what we've learned from Facebook topic data. We're looking at when we're looking at the audience, we can see that it's attracting this younger consumer, and we can see why. While they're also retaining their core older buyer and what that core older buyer is connecting with. When we look at the topics being discussed, watches and bags are clearly dominating the conversation here. So there is still this definite preference for accessories among the general consumer, at least the luxury consumer on Facebook. And they might want to consider that when they promote clothing, maybe connect the two, ensure that there's more focus on watches, or maybe bring into play some of those colours that were mentioned. Also, we noticed when we were looking at, we were checking the brand buzzwords around fake, for example, that there was also quite a lot of mention of things like vintage and authenticity. So maybe some campaigns about how the brand has shaped over the years, just relating it to its heritage. When it comes to type, it's clearly video. It was by far the most, the media type that was getting the most engagement. And of course, this could also be very useful as an educational tool. So it might be useful to help customers, to help them fight counterfeiting. So as an educational process, how do you spot a fake, for example? Where are the approved outlets and things like that? Looking at channels, we can see that news and gossip sites are the key conversation drivers. So that could be the original source for a lot of their content, and probably would be. But fashion bloggers, blog sites need to be considered. So it's a way, it's thinking about how to replicate what they're doing and build upon it and drive it out further. And then finally, the influencer, and indeed the influences. So who are the individuals and what else is influencing the conversation? So we can see that Selena Gomez is having a great impact. So that young influencers are really starting to do their job. So do they build on that? I'm sure they will. Okay, so
Sarah, it's Adam. Just a couple of comments on your conclusions. I think it's very, very interesting. I think the topic stuff around watches, which is considerably dominating the conversation by a factor of 10, is fascinating. And whether that audience is actually prepared to spend £3,000 on a watch, I don't know, but it clearly shows there's opportunities to create conversations with a wider audience using that topic. Just a point about a video, I mean, there's a clear insight here that everybody should be doing more video, and we see that the engagement levels on video are much higher than other types of content across multiple brands that we work with. So in a way, that's not a huge surprise, but I think what this type of data is very useful for is two things. First of all, to make a case to support investment in video content, because video is expensive, especially at this kind of premium brand level, but you can clearly see the impact that it has through this type of data. And that will be useful. And I think also, with further drilling down to look at those videos that are performing and those that are in the topics and the kind of way that those videos are being used, I think would be very interesting as well. And I think finally, it's always useful to see that the news and gossip sites are driving conversation. So this is people sharing articles that they're reading about the brand. And as you say, what can we learn about them? How do we take these as conversation starters for ourselves? How can we replicate and build on that content? I think there's some really great insights that you've come up with there, so thank you. So we've got some questions. So if we go through these questions, that would be great. The first one's from Nicole, and I think this is either Jay or Sarah, but the question is, for the LB audience, where are they hanging out? Is DataSift automatically providing the breakout of links being shared from various places? I don't know who wants to answer that one.
I can probably take that one because I think it's quite specific to this particular study. There is some level of differentiation between the links that comes from DataSift, but most of the insights from this study are derived from our own coding. So we looked into the sources in the market and grouped them according to the most fashion-related sources, and grouped them according to those topics that we mentioned. So which were fashion blogs and so on. So I don't know how much you know about Metric, but our background is got a lot of strength in media research. So we've just built on that essentially. It fits very well with Facebook and its reliance on sharing so-called traditional media coverage and social. I think that answers your question. I don't know if Jay, you've got anything to add to that.
No, I think that covers it. Thanks, Sarah.
The next question is probably one for you, Sarah, as well. So, from Magnus, do you need to subscribe to these services, or is it something that you can buy on a project basis? So, for example, prior to, or I guess even after a campaign launch?
Yeah, and the answer to that is you can use it as is useful. So we do it both ways. Either on a project by project basis. It could be for to explore a brand and before a campaign, or track it during a campaign and after a campaign, or it could be a rolling subscription. But within that, there is likely to be tweaks and changes to the scope to highlight certain aspects. And bring them to the fore. So you can, it can be used either way. We can ramp it up pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And another question from Agnes: is topic data available in multiple languages? I guess that's one for you, Jay.
Yeah, I can take that. Absolutely it is. So any language that people are posting in on Facebook, that text is available for analysis inside of topic data, and there's language detection performed as well.
Okay, and Jay, that really, I had a question for you actually related to that, because I think it's the scale of this data that's really amazing, isn't it? I mean, we're talking about, some of the slides that we've seen from Sarah, we're talking about not just a few conversations, but hundreds of thousands of conversations. And that really isn't the same as the data that we could get from our own Facebook page or looking at Facebook page data from other people. It's just on another scale, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. It is billions of what DataSift calls interactions, meaning posts, comments, likes, and reshares happening every day.
Fabulous.
I just mentioned as well, Adam, actually, if anyone is interested in that study, that dashboard is still live and still running, and we can give you access if you'd be interested in having a look at the data. Just get in touch and we can walk through it with you and let you have access.
Okay, great. We've got a question here from Polina. Have you done a similar analysis about other social platforms, e.g. Twitter, to see how it compares?
Yes, we have. We've done, it's one of the reasons why we chose the luxury brand sector, because we've done some work previously looking at brand associations across the luxury brand sector in multiple markets, and it was just so interesting how much it differed according to market. It's just a very interesting sector anyway. The brands are so recognisable, and the engagements are around so many different, for so many different reasons. It's a very complicated market, I feel, for a brand to navigate, because there are so many people that talk about the brand, are interested in the brand, but might not necessarily purchase, and it's very key, you know, it's essential, this kind of data, I feel, for that market. So yeah, short answer, we have done a lot of work in this area before. And in terms of how it, in terms of how it differs, I think they just complement each other. I think there are different strengths and weaknesses with both. As you've mentioned, it's the scale of Facebook that is the sort of wow factor with it, as well as the demographic details, which you can get an element of from Twitter, but it's nowhere near the same level of depth.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Have we got any more questions from the attendees? I think that might be it. Okay, thanks for the questions from you guys. And Sarah, really, and Jay, maybe it's a final question from me. What do people do next now if they want to explore this a little bit further? How do they go about understanding what it can do for their brand and their business?
Just get in touch. Contact either myself. My details are there. That's our Twitter account. Hit our webpage, our website, and we can, just a conversation, talk through what it is you're looking for and how we'd be able to help.
Fabulous. So on behalf of the Jay and Sarah and myself, thanks to everybody for taking part in the webinar today. The plan is that the slides will be sent out to you, so you can feel free to share those with your colleagues. And hope that was useful. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.